There I was, kneeling on the lawn in front of my own house. My hands were cuffed behind my back. Red and blue lights flashed across the neighborhood. Neighbors gathered on their porches, whispering, and my wife Heather stood on our front steps with her arms crossed and a smile on her face. I looked up at the house I had bought, the grass I had planted, the walls I had painted with my own hands. 7 years of marriage. And this was how it ended. But she did not know that smile would be her biggest mistake. Before I tell you what happened before that night, and what came after I got up from that lawn, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. And if stories about betrayal, justice, and starting over hit close to home, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Guillermo. I am 34 years old, born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. My family has been in this country for generations. I grew up watching my father work construction, and I followed in his footsteps, eventually becoming a civil engineer for a large firm. I was never the flashy type. I believed in hard work, honesty, and taking care of the people I loved. I met Heather 8 years ago through a mutual friend at a barbecue. She was 24 then, with a warm smile and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. She worked part-time at a furniture store, and she had this gentleness about her that made me feel safe. After 2 years of dating, I proposed. She said yes with tears in her eyes. I thought I had found my person. 4 years before everything fell apart, I bought us a house. It was a modest 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. I paid the down payment with money I had saved since I was 22. My name was on the deed. I paid the mortgage every single month. I spent weekends fixing up the place, painting the walls, building a deck in the backyard, planting grass in the front yard. That house was my pride. I thought it was our future. The first 2 years of marriage were good. Heather seemed grateful for everything I did. We talked about having kids, maybe buying some land outside the city building, something that would last. I worked long hours. I took on extra projects that required travel because I wanted to give her the life she deserved. I thought I was building a foundation for our family. But somewhere around year 3, things started to shift. Heather began complaining about my work trips. She said I was never home. At first I understood. I promised to cut back when I could. But even when I was home, she seemed distant. She spent more time on her phone, more time out with friends I had never met. When I asked about her day, she gave me one-word answers. I started noticing things. The credit card bills got higher, but I could not figure out where the money was going. She bought clothes I never saw her wear. She had dinners at restaurants I had never heard of. One evening, I came home early from a canceled meeting and found her sitting in her car in the driveway laughing on the phone. The moment she saw me, she ended the call. When I asked who it was, she said it was just a coworker. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. She started saying strange things. She would look around the house and say it needed to change, that she felt trapped. I offered to renovate, to redecorate, to do whatever would make her happy. She just shook her head and walked away. I did not understand what was happening. I kept thinking if I worked harder, loved her more, things would get better. Then came the trip that changed everything. My company assigned me to a major project in Oklahoma. It was a 2-week job, good money, the kind of opportunity that could lead to a promotion. I told Heather about it, expecting her to be upset. Instead, she barely reacted. She just nodded and said she would be fine. The night before I left, I held her and told her I loved her. She said it back, but her voice was hollow. During those 2 weeks in Oklahoma, I called her every day. Sometimes she answered, sometimes she did not. Her texts became shorter and shorter. I told myself she was just busy, that I was overthinking. I missed her. I bought her flowers to bring home and a bracelet from a little shop near the job site. I could not wait to see her face when I walked through the door. I finished the project a day early. I decided not to tell her, thinking I would surprise her. I drove 6 hours straight, exhausted but excited. I imagined her smile, her arms around me, the feeling of being home. I had no idea what was actually waiting for me. It was a Friday night around 9 o'clock when I pulled onto my street. The first thing I noticed was a black pickup truck parked in front of my house. I had never seen it before. I figured maybe Heather had a friend over, though she rarely had people at the house when I was away. I grabbed the flowers and the bracelet from the passenger seat and walked up to the front door. The lights were on inside. I could hear music playing. I used my key and stepped into the living room. What I saw stopped me cold. Heather was sitting on the couch with a man I had never seen before. He was maybe 38, with blonde hair and an expensive-looking shirt. His arm was draped over her shoulder, and her legs were curled up beside him. There were wine glasses on the coffee table. They were laughing at something on his phone. For a moment, no one moved. Then Heather looked up and saw me. Her expression did not change the way I expected. There was no shock, no guilt, no embarrassment. She looked at me like I was an inconvenience. I heard my own voice, though it did not sound like me. I asked her what was going on. The flowers slipped from my hand and hit the floor. She stood up slowly. The man stood up too, looking at me like I was the intruder. Heather crossed her arms and said something I will never forget. She told me I should not be there. She said I needed to leave. I could not process what I was hearing. This was my house. I paid for every inch of it. I asked her if she was serious. I asked who this man was. She did not answer. The man stepped forward and told me to get out. He spoke to me like he owned the place. I told him this was my home, that I was not going anywhere. Heather rolled her eyes. She said the house was going to be hers soon. She said the man whose name was Derek was going to help her. I still did not fully understand what she meant. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then Heather pulled out her phone. She started dialing. I asked her what she was doing. She did not answer. She just held the phone to her ear and waited. When the call connected, her whole demeanor changed. Her voice became shaky. She sounded scared. She told the operator there was a man who had broken into her home. She said he was threatening her and her boyfriend. She gave them our address and begged them to come quickly. When she hung up, she looked at me and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who thought they had already won. I told her she had lost her mind. I told her the police would see the truth. Derek told me I should run before they arrived. I did not move. This was my home. I was not going to be chased out of my own home by my cheating wife and her boyfriend. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 squad cars, 4 officers' lights flashing. By then, neighbors were coming out onto their porches. I could see them pointing, whispering. Heather ran out to meet the officers still playing the victim. She pointed at me and said I had forced my way in, that I had threatened her. Derek backed her up, nodding along his arm around her like he was protecting her. The officers ordered me to get on my knees and put my hands behind my head. I tried to explain. I told them I was her husband, that this was my house, that I had just come home from a work trip. They did not listen. One of them said they had to secure the scene first. He put handcuffs on me and told me to stay calm. I was kneeling on the grass I had planted myself. The lawn I had seeded, watered, mowed every weekend. And there was Heather standing on the porch with Derek watching me. She was smiling. She was actually smiling. Neighbors were recording on their phones. I could hear someone say something about a domestic dispute. My face burned with humiliation. I had never been in trouble with the law in my life. Now I was on my knees in front of my own house, treated like a criminal. One of the officers went inside to look around. Another one asked Derek for his ID. Heather kept telling them I was dangerous, that I had been harassing her for weeks. Everything she said was a lie. But in that moment, they had no way of knowing that. The officer inside the house came back out. He had found our wedding photos on the wall. He asked Heather about them. For the first time, I saw her hesitate. She said we were separated. The officer looked at me, then at her, then at the house. He asked to see my ID. I told him it was in my wallet in my back pocket. He took it out and looked at the address. It matched the house. He talked to his partner in a low voice. Then he came over to me and removed the handcuffs. He said I had every right to be there. He said the situation was being reevaluated. He warned Heather that filing a false police report was a serious offense. Derek suddenly had somewhere else to be. He mumbled something about not wanting any trouble and walked quickly to his truck. He drove off without looking back. Heather went inside and slammed the door. The officers told me I could go in if I wanted. They gave me their card in case I needed to file a report. Then they left. I stood on my lawn for a long time after that. The neighbors went back inside. The street went quiet. And I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. I did not go inside right away. I could not. I sat in my truck with the engine off, staring at the house I had built my dreams around. My hands were shaking. My mind kept replaying the image of Heather smiling while I was on my knees in handcuffs. I needed to think clearly. I needed a plan. I called my best friend Marcus. He was a lawyer, one of the smartest people I knew. I told him everything that had just happened. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he told me something that changed everything. He said Heather had committed a crime. Filing a false police report was a misdemeanor in Texas. She could face up to a year in jail or a fine of up to $4,000. He told me I had options. That night, I did not sleep in my own house. I drove to a 24-hour coffee shop and sat with my laptop. I wrote down everything that had happened, every detail, every word I could remember. I contacted a colleague who was a retired police officer and asked him about the process for filing a complaint. He walked me through it, step by step. By sunrise, I had a plan. I called a divorce attorney and scheduled an appointment for 8 in the morning. I gathered every document I had, the deed to the house, the mortgage statements, bank records, showing every payment I had made. I was ready. The attorney confirmed what I already knew. The house was mine. I had bought it before the marriage with my own savings. My name was the only one on the deed. Heather had no legal claim to it. The attorney drafted divorce papers that morning. The grounds were adultery and fraud. The papers demanded that Heather vacate the property within 30 days. After the attorney meeting, I went to the police station. I filed a formal complaint against Heather for filing a false police report. I provided a written statement, the names of officers who had responded, and the contact information for neighbors who had witnessed everything. I also gave them Derek's name. He would have to be interviewed as part of the investigation. By noon, I had done everything I could do on my end. Now it was time for Heather to learn that actions have consequences. I hired a professional process server. I gave him the divorce papers and the address. I told him my wife would be home. He said he would handle it. Heather was served that afternoon. She had been sitting in the house, probably thinking she had gotten away with everything. The process server knocked on the door and handed her the envelope. Inside were divorce papers and a notice that she had 30 days to leave the property. She called me 17 times that afternoon. I did not answer. She left voicemails, each one angrier than the last. She said I was overreacting. She said I could not do this to her. She said she would fight me in court. I saved every message. They would be useful later. She also called Derek. According to what came out later during the investigation, he told her he wanted nothing to do with any of this. He said she was on her own. So much for the man who was going to help her take my house. Over the next few weeks, the investigation moved forward. The police reviewed everything. They obtained footage from a neighbor's security camera that showed me arriving calmly carrying flowers, using my own key. There was nothing threatening about my behavior. They interviewed Derek, who admitted that he had known Heather was married all along. He confirmed that I had not made any threats. His testimony made it clear that Heather had lied. The district attorney's office charged Heather with filing a false police report. She was given a court date. Faced with the evidence against her, she chose to plead guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence. The judge gave her 2 years of probation, 100 hours of community service, and a fine. She now had a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. The judge reviewed all the evidence, the deed, the financial records, the circumstances of the marriage's end. Heather walked away with nothing but the personal belongings she had brought into the marriage. The house stayed with me. Everything I had worked for stayed with me. On the day the divorce was finalized, I saw her one last time in the courthouse hallway. She looked smaller than I remembered. There was no smile this time. I did not say anything to her. There was nothing left to say. I simply turned and walked out into the sunlight. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel vindicated. But all I felt was tired. Tired and strangely empty. The woman I had loved for 7 years was gone, and the life I had imagined was gone with her. Justice had been served, but justice does not heal a broken heart. The first few months after the divorce were the hardest. I stayed in the house because it was mine, but every corner reminded me of her. The couch where she had sat with Derek. The kitchen where we used to cook together. The bedroom where I now slept alone. I would wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for someone who was not there anymore. I threw myself into work, but even that felt hollow. I would sit in meetings and realize I had not heard a single word anyone said. My appetite disappeared. I lost 15 pounds. Friends called to check on me, but I did not know what to say. How do you explain that the person you trusted most in the world turned out to be a stranger? There was one night, about 2 months after the divorce, when I hit bottom. I was sitting alone in the dark living room, holding our wedding rings in my hand. Hers had been left behind on the kitchen counter. I stared at those 2 small circles of gold and asked myself where I had gone wrong. What had I missed? How had I been so blind? Then something shifted inside me. I realized I was punishing myself for someone else's betrayal. Heather had made her choices. Those choices said everything about her and nothing about me. I could not control what she had done, but I could control what I did next. I started small. I began going to the gym every morning before work. At first I hated it. But slowly, I started to feel stronger, not just physically, but mentally. I started eating better. I started sleeping through the night again. Then I decided to reclaim my house. I spent a weekend repainting every room in colors Heather would have never chosen. I bought new furniture. I rearranged everything. By the time I was done, it did not feel like our house anymore. It felt like my house, my fresh start. I reconnected with my family. My parents had been worried sick about me, but they had given me space to process everything. Now I started having Sunday dinners with them again. I visited my grandmother, who made me her famous tamales and told me that tough times build tough men. I started to remember who I was before Heather. I made new friends too. At the gym, I met a group of guys who went hiking every weekend. I had never been much of an outdoor person, but I decided to try it. The first time I reached the top of a hill and looked out over the Texas countryside, I felt something I had not felt in a long time, I felt peace. About a year after the divorce, I ran into Heather at a grocery store. I almost did not recognize her. She looked tired, worn down, nothing like the confident woman who had smiled while I was in handcuffs. Derek had left her long ago. The criminal record had made it hard for her to find steady work. She was living in a small apartment on the other side of town. She tried to talk to me. She said she was sorry. She asked if we could get coffee sometime just to talk. I looked at her for a long moment. There was a time when I would have done anything to hear her say she was sorry. But that time had passed. I told her I did not hate her. That was true. The anger had faded months ago. But I also told her I did not need anything from her anymore. Not her apology, not her explanation, not her presence in my life. I wished her well, and I meant it. Then I walked away and did not look back. 18 months after the worst night of my life, I found myself in a place I never expected. I had been promoted to project manager at my company. I bought a small piece of land outside the city and started building a cabin for weekend getaways. And I started dating again, slowly, carefully. I met a woman named Diane at a volunteer event where we were building homes for families in need. She was nothing like Heather. She was independent, honest, and kind, without expecting anything in return. We started as friends, grabbing coffee after volunteer shifts, talking about our lives. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people getting to know each other. I do not know what the future holds with Diane. Maybe it will turn into something more. Maybe it will not. But for the first time in years, I am okay with not knowing. I have learned that you cannot control other people. You can only control how you respond to them. You can only control who you choose to become. I still think about that night sometimes. The red and blue lights, the cold metal of the handcuffs, the sound of Heather laughing. But when I think about it now, I do not feel pain. I feel gratitude. That night showed me who she really was. It also showed me who I really am, someone who does not give up, someone who fights for himself, someone who can walk through fire and come out stronger. Some lessons you only learn the hard way. Here is what that night taught me. Not everyone deserves your trust, but that does not mean you should stop trusting. It just means you should trust more carefully. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. The signs are always there. We just do not always want to see them. Betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise from it does. And forgiveness is not about setting the other person free. It is about setting yourself free. If you are going through something similar right now, I want you to know that it gets better. It does not feel like it in the moment. I know that. But you are stronger than you think. And the life waiting for you on the other side of this pain is worth fighting for. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone betray your trust in a way that changed your life? How did you handle it? Leave your story in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please give it a like, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for being here and for listening. I hope you find the peace and the strength you deserve. Take care of yourself, and remember the best chapters of your life might still be ahead.